In our news tonight, the supermarket rush curbed, but concerns arise about lines at post offices. Nurses asking for tougher safety protocols to protect themselves from COVID-19. More water tanks installed at Sherburne in St. John. And in sports, the inaugural Caribbean Games to proceed despite the new dates for the Tokyo Olympics.
Broadcasting from our studios in the Pine St. Michael, this is CBC Newsnight, starting now.
Good evening, I'm Lisa Broom. In our top story tonight, Barbadians have been responding positively to the new shopping measures introduced by government to allow them to acquire goods during the current 24-hour lockdown. This after Acting Prime Minister Santia Bradshaw announced yesterday that supermarkets will reopen today following a 4-day closure, but in-store shopping will be forbidden. Rianne Phillips tells us more.
The long lines and chaos that reigned at some supermarkets last Friday were replaced by order and silence. Only a handful of people waited patiently at storefronts to collect their items. HR manager at Popular Discounts, Rashida Paris, and store manager at Chanel Black Rock, Mark Jordan, both say shoppers have been selecting the prepackaged grocery bags or calling in orders.
Persons are calling over the phone and via WhatsApp. I think we had as much as 400 orders yesterday alone, so there's a lot of orders that are coming in. So we're trying to keep up with that.
Most households now seem to be running out of basic items that they require at this time, and curbside ordering is coming at this time pretty important to those people who will need those items at this time, and the best thing to do is to work with them. It has been a very hectic morning. Has been very busy, and we're getting there. Everything is working out so far. Everybody's coming and picking up their items and moving on as quick as possible.
And with this shopping arrangement set to continue tomorrow and Saturday, officials are advising people to only order essential items.
Persons are ordering even things like pancake mix and things that they could do without during this time, and just stick to the basics like the flour, the corned beef and so on. We're not getting to meet as much of those types of orders. And persons that would have ordered before are coming back ordering again. So it's very, very hectic.
While the authorities have successfully reduced the contact and exposure at supermarkets, post officers are presenting another challenge. Despite the introduction of the alphabetical surname system to cater to pensioners who would be cashing checks early, snaking lines still led to post offices across the country earlier today. Hundreds braced the daytime heat in the north, east and central areas under the watchful eyes of the police. In response to today's events, the Barbados Association of Retired Persons, or BARP, has urged seniors to be more careful in public.
I want to appeal to our seniors again. If you have to leave home, and it's evident that some of you have to leave home to cash your checks, that there's nobody that can do that for you, please practice social distancing. Please wear masks. Because what's going to happen, if this continues, you're going to put a burden, a real heavy burden on the social services in this country. You have to make an attempt to protect yourselves.
People with the surnames between the letters of I and Z are expected to cash their pension checks tomorrow. Rianne Phillips, CBC News.
Thanks, Rianne. And there's some good news tonight. 2 more people have recovered from COVID-19 in Barbados, bringing the total number of recoveries to 8. The information was revealed by the Ministry of Health in a release this morning. The national total for positive cases remains at 63 and deaths at 3. Of the 63 positive cases, 33 are female and 30 male, with ages ranging between 7 and 95 years old. 52 people remain in isolation. Meanwhile, the ministry is calling for people who arrived in the island from the US and UK between March 15th and 22nd to contact them. These individuals may call telephone number 832-6171 between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. daily, or WhatsApp or text the information to that number. Acting Chief Medical Officer Dr. Anton Best advises the measure is being taken so that the ministry can establish a register of these people and maintain regular contact to ensure they remain well. The Barbados Nurses Association is calling for more stringent protocols to safeguard the health and safety of its members as the situation with COVID-19 worsens. President Joanna Waterman made the call as Barbados and the rest of the world celebrated World Health Day yesterday as it grapples with the deadly pandemic. She says overall the BNA is pleased with the processes so far, including the stockpiling of personal protective equipment as well as the constant situation updates.
We urge management and the authorities now to make it mandatory for all nurses in the emergency room to don PPEs and mandatory testing for nurses who are found to have been exposed to positive patients revealed after the fact. This is actually in light of the fact that COVID-19 patients are reaching the emergency room unknown to nurses and medical personnel. Such a protocol was implemented during the HIV/AIDS pandemic regarding needle sticks, so this, of course, would not be a precedent.
Ms. Waterman says there were plans to celebrate 2020 as the year of the nurse and midwife, and the pandemic has brought into sharp focus the critical role they play in healthcare.
We welcome, of course, the Cuban nurses who have been recruited to assist in this national emergency state, as we pay kudos to our local nurses, the unsung nightingales, who remain committed to duty to care in this life-threatening environment. I urge the authorities and nurses to pay attention to the World Health Organization's State of the World Nursing Report that has been put out today, which gives important guidelines related to workforce indicators for staffing and working conditions on the whole for nurses.
The construction aspect of the COVID-19 isolation and quarantine centers at Harrison Point in St. Lucie was completed in just under 5 weeks. Word of this from project manager Joseph Steinbach, who officially handed over the facility to government on Monday.
The buildings have all been completed. They have all their services in them, water, electricity, fire alarm systems, everything have been tested, checked, and agreed they're working. You will see that on the exterior, the NCC is still doing landscaping, and that will go on for a little bit. And we are here now, we've handed over to the QEH hospital, and they will now start implementing the administration function of the place. And we will assist them with anything that they need to get the place up and running, because they now have to outfit it and get it ready from being buildings to a functional facility.
A Barbadian diplomat in Geneva says it won't be business as usual for Barbados post-COVID-19 on the international front. Permanent representative to the United Nations in Geneva, Ambassador Chad Blackman, says work continues on behalf of Barbados. He says the coronavirus has forced the diplomatic community to find new ways of conducting diplomacy rather than face-to-face. Ambassador Blackman says the pandemic has brought to the fore the vulnerabilities of small island states like Barbados and the need for special provisions within the international multilateral system to ensure countries are protected.
For example, you can see the impact on the tourism sector. Cancellations, persons are not coming, flights are not coming in, and therefore the foreign exchange that we need is not going to be there as it normally would because of that. Now, because Barbados is classified as a high-income country by the World Bank, we are therefore often precluded from certain concessional finance in the international system that larger countries sometimes may have, even though they're a lot wealthier than Barbados. They have a huge financial base, and when you divide that by their population size, they're either considered middle income or low income. But they have access to that finance when we don't.
Ambassador Blackman insists level heads must prevail at this time as the world battles the pandemic.
Finger pointing is not going to help, and I think honestly that we can get it done. Whether it's a small nation, a large nation, we can get it done, but we have to band together, because this is not a developed country issue or developing country issue or a landlocked country issue or coastal state issue. This is an issue that has literally changed the entire world in a matter of weeks and months. So therefore, we have to come together to address it.
The 35 elderly Trinidadians who have been quarantined in Barbados for the past 2 weeks have been given the all clear. The group was allowed to land in Barbados after being refused re-entry into their country, which is on lockdown. They were staying in a hotel at their expense. Now, speaking during a media conference yesterday, COVID-19 czar Richard Carter says they have now completed the mandatory 14-day quarantine.
None of those persons have tested positive while they have been in quarantine, and therefore they would have been discharged from quarantine as of, I believe, yesterday. I understand that some arrangements are being made for their repatriation, but those arrangements would not necessarily be arrangements made by the government of Barbados because they are private citizens and citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and those arrangements would be made between themselves and the government and whatever carrier is available to take them home.
Well, Mr. Carter confirms they were not tested as there was no requirement on government's part to do so unless they became symptomatic.
If the government of Trinidad wants them tested before they leave Barbados, then that can be facilitated, obviously, but we have asked if that is required, that the appropriate number of test kits be made available to us to facilitate that.
Well, we're also hearing tonight that Trinidad and Tobago has sent a diplomatic note to Barbados concerning COVID-19 testing for those 35 people. The move is a potential first step toward getting them back home. We have a report from TTT, Trinidad and Tobago.
Minister of National Security Stuart Young revealed he has taken steps to have nationals who have been quarantined in Barbados tested.
Provided COVID testing cases. Thankfully, our 35, the number keeps switching. The lawyers wrote me and told me 33, then I hear 35. We provided the test kits to the government of Barbados for them to be tested.
He said, though, it is better and even safer for anyone to stay put instead of trying to return to this country.
The worst thing that can happen is they then go, if I hope they test negative coming out of their mandatory quarantine, and they re-engage with persons in public or persons who may have the COVID virus, and then they can be contaminated all over again.
Minister Young has been liaising with lawyers for the Trinidadians in Suriname, and he was in contact with the government in Suriname to have nationals tested in that country. He also urged the Trinidadians in Venezuela to contact the embassy in Caracas.
About 140 Europeans who have been stranded in Barbados are finally going home. 2 special flights from Barbados have been organized by the European Union delegation to Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. 1 flight left this afternoon and the other will leave tomorrow. Ambassador Daniela Tramachere says a total of about 500 citizens from 23 EU countries were stranded across 7 Caribbean countries.
The major flight today is leaving Barbados, stopping over in Tobago to pick up all the Europeans in Trinidad and Tobago, but the ones from Trinidad will have reached Tobago, and then from Tobago it goes to Frankfurt. The flight tomorrow will leave, the Condor flight will leave from Barbados. It's not a commercial flight, as I said, we chartered Condor with Lufthansa, of course. And tomorrow we will have also chartered 3 flights coming from Antigua, stopping over in Dominica. Then we have 1 coming from Anguilla, stopping over in St. Lucia. And we have 1 coming from Grenada, St. Vincent.
Well, the ambassador made it clear that the nationals are healthy and are showing no symptoms of the coronavirus. She says those coming from across the region will not be leaving the tarmac to board the chartered flights. She thanked the respective Caribbean governments and regional carrier Liat for their exceptional support.
There has been absolute cooperation, immediate availability, so top-notch, really. Of course, it is in the interest of everybody, you know. Nobody likes to have stranded citizens in one's own soil, on one's own soil. But I must say that the cooperation has been fabulous. The difficulties have been more in finding out who was where and contacting, a person.
Well, supply chain distortion of produce owing to the lockdown over COVID-19 is hurting Barbadian farmers. It's a situation the Barbados Agricultural Society says will impact on cash flow. Chief Executive Officer James Paul says farmers continue their work despite the restrictions and closure of supermarkets.
Certainly, it's not an easy time because still, even with those measures, we are not sure that all of the produce, say for instance, that can be produced this week, will not be meats and vegetables, will be able to offload through this process because the supermarkets are, as indicated, a critical part. And they are still hampered in some way because I don't believe the online selling of commodities will be as effective. But so that's something that mindful, and farmers will be in certain situations, especially for instance in pork. Right now, for instance, we have pork coming on this week, and all of that pork will not have been able to be slaughtered, so some are going to next week. But we are hopeful that by the time next week comes and we review the whole shutdown, that basically we will have some easing so that we can get more produce marketed at the same time.
And while the introduction of online shopping and pre-packed grocery bags are a welcomed move, Mr. Paul says the bags lack local produce.
You will notice that most of the items that are placed for online shopping and packaged goods that some supermarkets have do not include a significant number of local items. In some cases, for instance, I pleased to know at least that the government has indicated to farmers that they can now go about the business without having to apply for an emergency pass between the hours of 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. But of course, respect still has to be made to the curfew. The thing is, though, that Barbadians have become accustomed to purchasing, of course, their items in a particular way. And the other side, of course, we have to be mindful of the whole biosecurity issues too, because I would hope that those farmers who attempt to sell to consumers, that they are mindful of the fact that they have to adhere to the social distancing provision. And that is, of course, something I hope that they are mindful of, that we don't want to be part of the problem rather than part of the solution.
Well, less than 24 hours after St. John MP Charles Griffith made a plea to the Barbados Water Authority to do something to assist the water woes of the people of Sherburne and St. John, 2 new tanks were installed in the community. Shane Jones has that follow-up.
Even though the major problem of dry taps still hasn't been fixed in Sherburne, there were smiles on some of the faces of the residents in the close-knit community because 2 new tanks simply means more water for them. When our cameras traveled to St. John, we caught people collecting water from their new tanks. They were full of gratitude.
I just want to say thanks on behalf of my household for the water tank and the assistance that we are getting. Thank you very much.
It really is a help because not only because it's close to my home, but even before this tank was here, for the time that I was home, I was seeing the truck regular on a basis. So I really don't have no complaints. I'm grateful for the tank being placed here.
MP Charles Griffith was once again on the scene, getting more feedback from his constituents. He says he is happy with the prompt action from the Barbados Water Authority.
Here in Sherburne number 2, this 1,000 gallon tank was placed yesterday in number 3. A second one was placed to help alleviate the water problems within the community of Sherburne. So this is a proactive approach from the government and from the Barbados Water Authority as it relates to the concerns and the needs of the constituents in St. John. I know the ideal situation is to have running water again, but until we can rectify that particular problem in terms of having water in the pipe system again, I think that these 2 tanks would go a long way in helping to alleviate the problem that are faced by residents within the community.
Shane Jones, CBC News.
Thanks, Shane. And still to come, a look at some of the stories making headlines across the region. But before we get to that, here's a tip from Cooperators General Insurance.
This tip of the day is brought to you by Cooperators General Insurance Company Limited. Insurance the way you want it to be.
Try and make sure wheelchair users and people short of stature can reach counters. If that's not possible, come around to the front of the counter to talk to them and offer a stable surface to write on if needed. This tip is brought to you in association with the Barbados Council for the Disabled.
The Caribbean has so far avoided the scarier level of COVID-19 seen across Europe, Asia, and the U.S., but the region's numbers are starting to jump. And the Pan American Health Organization is telling Barbados and others in the region to expect a surge. Director Dr. Carissa Etienne says the situation will get worse before it gets better.
Within the assessments that we've been able and analysis that we've been able to make, we do believe that in the next month or so, 3 to 6 weeks, that many of our countries will begin to see an increase in their number of cases. There's some of our countries that will probably experience an overwhelming of their health systems, and we would probably also see increased number of deaths.
Well, Dr. Etienne says as more people get sick, the brave frontline health workers are put at risk.
Countries must work together to ensure that supply chains are able to deliver protective equipment to the hospitals and health centers, those who need it most. Solidarity and coordination among countries will be essential to ensure that we make the most of the limited supplies available. Now is not the time to hoard and stockpile. It is a time for easing export restrictions and embracing flexible regulations that enable access in the places that will be hardest hit in the next few weeks.
As Guyana examines proposals for a stimulus package to cushion the effects of COVID-19 on the economy, Minister of Finance Winston Jordan says financing of government services and expenditure remains critical. Already, the private sector is benefiting from the removal of VAT on certain items and a reduction in the fuel price. We have a report from NCN News.
Finance Minister Winston Jordan reiterates that government generates revenue through taxes and any further reduction can result in an economic crisis. He noted that so far, government has been able to pay employees and other expenditure. The Finance Minister said it is for these reasons that financial resources have to be managed sensibly.
This quarter here, we expect a dramatic reduction in revenues because of the slowdown in business activity and hence obviously slowdown in taxes and so on.
Minister Jordan noted that the administration is examining certain proposals that can cushion the effects of COVID-19 on the local economy.
Whatever we agree finally out there is viable, can be financed in whatever way, while not reducing the level of services that the government has been able to deliver to the population.
COVID-19 has negatively impacted global economies, resulting in governments resorting to stimulus packages to boost revenue. Here, some private sector businesses have reduced their workforce and in other instances cut back on salaries to its employees.